Hello, everybody. It's Friday. That means it's time for another topic of the week. So, first things first, last week's topic on your Forge World AoS wish list. I was surprised that as many people kind of had the same, thought that I did. And what I mean by that is just that a lot of people also wanted to see sort of expansions or options or support for existing factions or add-on bits or something like that, within AoS. I thought that was kind of cool because I really thought I would be one of the few people who supported that. I thought other people would want big monsters or something like that, but I was glad to hear it. So maybe, that kind of stuff has been very successful for 40k and 30k, obviously, or Horus Heresy, whatever you want to say. So maybe there's something there as well. Take note, Games Workshop. But this week's topic, well, we're finally here. We're finally here that we're going to ask the all-important question for the topic of the week that we've been wanting to talk about. What do you think of AoS 2.0? The game's been out. It's been out for a little while now. We've got roughly 2 weeks into it. I feel like that's enough time. People have hopefully... I've been working my way, actually, through making sure I'm absorbing all of these two books. I read through the core book, obviously, in advance of the show on Wednesday to get all the story and things like that. So now I've just been rereading everything here. Obviously, a lot of stuff, especially the GHB, we already knew. I had already read all the point stuff, so I'm just kind of going through everything. And there's so much little stuff to discover in here. Let me just point out. These books are packed with stuff. Just an easy example, the Malign Sorcery book. Where you don't... It's got just interesting stories about all the spells, but also, paint things for all the spells, paint guides. There's also just a bunch of fun, interesting, different scenarios. So if you're ever looking for sort of different scenarios, there's a lot in here. Just other stuff to do, other Path to Glory things... Cool stuff. There's 2 pitched battle profiles in here that I hope certain small tournaments use. I think they're kind of cool. They're more focused on the endless spells. But I think what I want to talk about is sort of your overall impressions. The in toto, are you happy with AoS 2.0? It's actually, when I think about it, quite amazing just how much came out at once, how much has changed. I think my only, before I get into that, when you look at, everything that came out in the GHB, new scenarios, obviously updated points and all of that kind of thing, refreshed allegiance abilities, but you also look and you see the complete refresh of the rules, the introduction of the endless spells, the integration of what used to be a lot of rules of 1 into the core. There's just so much there. As well as, of course, the new forces that released here, but we're not talking about them. We'll talk about the Stormcast and the Nighthaunt sometime in the future. All in all, I have to say I've gotten a couple games in now. I've got another one lined up for tomorrow, and I gotta say I have really had fun. But most importantly, I haven't noticed it. What I mean by that is I mean it in the best way possible. The changes, for the most part, have felt positive and natural. Extensions of sort of how I wanted to already play. The tiebreaker rule on turn priority. It's come up a couple times in my games, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's how that works now. Cool. And that was it. It's just simple, super easy thing. Obviously the presence of the endless spells is kind of a big deal, but maybe it's just in my particular experience, but you just don't tend to get that many of them off. The game isn't amuck with, 10 endless spells cruising around the table or something. It's usually 1 or 2. Part of that is the fact that they cost points, which is the right choice. So it puts pressure on them. You can't just load your list with them and start wheeling and dealing them out there. But they're cool when they show up, and they do change the way you think about the game. So I thought that's kind of cool. I've really got to say I've enjoyed more or less everything, and yes, I'm aware there's a couple weird sort of broken loopholes out there that I'm sure will be addressed by the FAQ. None of those have shown up on my table, just because that's not the kind of games I play within my group. much more casual, fun sort of group that rather than sort of a trying to make hard edge lists group. Nothing wrong with that. It's not a value judgment. It's just a statement. And I think if I had two laments, it would be this. I wish they had gone a little farther with the allegiance abilities. Like, I think they had a neat chance to actually introduce a couple additional new ones here. Like, there could have been an ogre allegiance ability. There could have been maybe another Skaven allegiance ability or something like that. So I think they that's sort of a missed opportunity. I know it sounds silly because it's like it's an embarrassment of riches. You always want more. But nonetheless, I feel like that would have been a fairly light touch way. I mean, I'm talking 2 or 3 pages in the GHB for this. What is it? I guess each allegiance ability is technically 2 pages, so let's call it 4 to 6 pages. There you go. Probably not the biggest, craziest thing in the world. And it could have opened up a big range of miniatures that people would be very excited to play with. So I think that is a little bit of a miss. I don't have... I have an army of ogres. I never play them. I don't like them. They're sitting somewhere. Basically, they're an old army from way back in the early 2000s, whenever they came out, 2006. But, obviously I would love more rat attention, so... Still fingers crossed for that Legions of Skaven book. The only other thing that I found tricky is it is kind of difficult to remember what's where. Stuff moved. And so, like, the core allegiance abilities are sitting in the core book. Like, I know that sounds silly, but given the way I stated it. All right, the 4 Grand Alliance allegiance abilities are in the core book, but the faction-specific ones are in the General's Handbook. And, Malign Sorcery has some of the realm-specific stuff, like spells and artifacts, but the core book has the realm rules. That sounds right. I honestly had to sit there and think about it in my head right now to make sure I wasn't getting confused again. And that's part of my point. I kind of wish there was like a more almost logical way it was divided. I'm not sure. It feels like it was probably divided more by necessity than by a sort of grand architectural plan. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't mind having all 3 of those books. In general, once you know what you want, you sort of have it. It's relatively easy to reference. Especially since, like, if you're taking a realm artifact, you're just going to write it down on your sheet or whatever, and then it's not like you're going back to the book to reference that. This weapon is now -3 rend. Okay, got it. Cool. So it's not like it's a problem for reference material. I find that I reference almost nothing except my scrolls, still. I haven't gone back to the rules, I think, other than, like, I don't know, 1 or 2 times in several games. So just like before, I mean, the only thing I usually ever reference during a game is the War Scrolls. That was true then, it's true now. So I don't really have a problem with reference material. But I do wish it was sort of... I can see it being confusing, especially perhaps for some newer players, to, like, remember, wait a minute, where is everything at? So, those are minor gripes. I mean, the definition of minor gripes. And in the end, I feel like, who cares? we can get it. We can turn it around. When we go through sort of when we have our new General's Handbook for 19 and whatever, we'll do what we do. It also makes me wonder about the printing of the allegiance abilities in the core book, only because, like, those are going to then be harder to change. Like, they're very dynamic. The allegiance abilities have changed in almost every incarnation of them. They frequently shift around. A new book comes out, the old allegiance abilities go away, and new things get introduced. So they're very dynamic, and it feels like they didn't stamp them in gold. So why did we put them in the core book, a book that I'm not going to replace theoretically for a long time? Whereas the General's Handbook is on a timer. Like that, I buy that book, it's cheap, it's softback for a reason. We know it's only good for a year, and then chuck it because a new one's out. So, are you telling me that next year you're not going to want to update the core allegiance abilities? Just a thought. Anywho, this is a minor concern at most, but just something that occurred to me. So, anyways, what I want to know is, what are your thoughts? What do you love? What are your little minor nits if you've got them, or maybe you've got bigger problems? But what do you think of it? So drop that down in the comments, or make a response video if you do. Link me to that, and I'll link it down below. As always, you can look down there and see all of the linked response videos. Of course, you can also look down there and see last week's topic if you want to go back to that and reference everything there. As always, appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.